Hi, everybody. This is Addison Shonland from AirInsight. Today is September the 19th. My guest is Gavin Laidlaw, and Gavin is Chief Commercial Officer at Signol in the UK. Gavin, thank you very much for spending some time with me.
You're welcome.
So let's start off. Tell us about Signol.
Well, Signol is a very interesting esoteric company I first came across when I was working for Shell Aviation as the GM of Business Development. And I was introduced to them by Shell Ventures when we were screening for technology investments in aviation, and in particular looking for options for decarbonisation. And I was immediately captivated by Signol. Signol's approach is pretty unique. It's a team of behavioural scientists and data scientists who use best practice in behaviour science to nudge operators to be more fuel efficient and therefore save carbon. We work in two verticals. We started in aviation, nudging pilots, of course, and we're now also in maritime, nudging ships officers. And the savings can amount to 1 to 2% in aviation, with marginal gains on fuel economy manoeuvres like single engine taxiing or discretionary fuel. And in shipping, between 5 and 12%, potentially looking at things like vessel trim, rudder optimization, and using the tools at the disposal of the ship's captain and chief engineer to run the vessels more efficiently.
So your company caught my attention with that whole Virgin Atlantic story, and it took 8 months and 110,000 observations in that project. Could you tell us about that? Because that sounds really fascinating.
Thank you. Yeah, Virgin is an interesting case study. The original academic study by the University of Chicago was with Virgin some 7 or 8 years ago now, which was the first application of behavioral science into aviation. And on the back of that savings, Signol was founded as a company. It took some time to renegotiate a commercial deal, but I'm glad to say that that was reached, and we started nudging pilots in December last year. And in the first half of this year, we managed to save Virgin more than 1,000 tons of jet fuel and about 3,000 tons of carbon by gently nudging pilots up the performance curve in terms of the 4 behaviors that we were tracking.
So what are the observations that are described there?
So we take data from a flight data recorder, and we use algorithms to identify behaviors. So when there's a certain sequence of events within the data set, you know that an activity has happened, such as single engine taxiing, for instance, or idle reverse thrust. So we are able to then give individual targets to captains based on their historic performance, and sort of give them a small stretch target to try and improve performance. To me, as someone new to the industry, it's quite surprising that even on standard operating procedures, there's a big range in performance, even when you normalize for aircraft, route, weather, air traffic control, etc. And what we try and do is remind and prime pilots to recall their training and to execute the fuel economy maneuvers more frequently than they would do on their own.
And how have pilots reacted to this? It seems like they reacted positively.
It's fair to say pilots are obviously very professional. Excuse me. They all take pride in their job, and they all want to be as good as they can possibly be. And this was a unique way of connecting them with a side of their performance they'd not necessarily seen before, and in a positive way, which is not always the case, I'm sad to say, in terms of operations teams' relationships with pilots. So this is seen as like an individual coach. We don't name and shame pilots to their management team. It is something that is between Signol and the pilot, and it's really about them being the best version of themselves they can be, and making them aware where they have an opportunity to make a marginal gain and improve carbon efficiency, which is in obviously everyone's interest.
You didn't have to incentivize anybody?
No, in fact, in the original study with Virgin, there was an attempt to try and incentivize pilots, and the unions were quite clear that they didn't want pilots making decisions for financial gain when there's a safety implication. So, for instance, loading discretionary fuel. But what we do have is pro-social incentives. So there's an option module where the company in question can devote some of its corporate social responsibility budget to the program, and then we can make donations when milestones are achieved, which obviously is an additional incentive emotionally for the pilot. But also what we've seen in feedback is that it improves pilot welfare and job satisfaction.
Gavin, my last question. There are several sources coming out now with black boxes that can be installed. They're small, and what they do is they connect to all the avionics, and this allows data to be drawn from these avionics in through the box, transmitted to the airplane operator, the lessor, the banker, whoever it is that needs to see it, providing a great deal of information, not just about fuel burn, but about performance of the airplane. How does your approach differ? Obviously, you're a software, this is a hardware, but how is your approach, I don't want to say better, but how does it, what is the offer that works better, let's say, for an operator?
Yeah, I think it's a fair question. I mean, to be frank, Signol welcomes the transparency that more data gives us. So if we have more high quality, high fidelity data, that actually plays into our hands in regards of it gives us more opportunities to identify behaviors, more opportunities to nudge and improve behaviors for fuel economy. So we don't see them as competing, rather more like complementary systems.
Right.
We've had some very good discussions with the likes of Flight and other software providers who are interested in giving higher frequency real-time data. And that's something that we welcome both in aviation and in shipping, actually, where, for instance, in shipping, we get higher quality telemetry data versus noon reports. So that's certainly something we welcome in terms of hardware installed on aircraft. Regarding the software side, I mean, I think the one thing that makes Signol relatively unique is if you look at fuel economy software that's in the aviation space, such as Jeppesen, Stork, Jet, etc., all very, very fine software. What they do effectively is very accurately, and we've got some very clever and sophisticated data analytics and algorithms, they show you the gap to perfection. So they take your actual, they look at the flight, and they describe what could have happened in an ideal world if humans behaved like robots. But that still leaves the flight operations teams with a problem. Is how do I now fix this? I know I've got a problem. How do I fix it? The nice thing about Signol, not only does it describe that gap to you, but it creates the motivation within the users to close that gap. And that's really the thing that makes Signol unique.
I couldn't resist. I've got one thing that's bouncing around my head based on what you've just said. So, for example, if there were another source of data, like the hardware, the guys in the hardware shops, you could utilize that flow of data to do what you do.
Absolutely. Anywhere where we have high quality data on a binary decision, so it's either something that was done or it was not done, that's nudgeable. So if I look at shipping, for instance, there's a huge gulf in the quality of the fidelity of the data. So the noon reports give us a 24-hour snapshot of the vessel and some parameters that allow us to nudge on things like fuel economy. But we aren't able to back work in terms of what actually happened in terms of the mariners, what did they actually do? But because we've got high quality data in aviation, we're able to say, okay, at 2:04 time stamped, this was shut off. And I think that's the difference between the two verticals we grapple with at the moment. But to be honest, the more data we have, the happier we are, because we can look for trends, we can look for patterns, and we can make suggestions about new behaviors we're able to identify and try and nudge.
Thank you. Great conversation.
Thank you very much.